I just want to talk a couple of minutes about upcoming events as well as this one, because I have you here. It's a nice opportunity to do so. Wickford Harbor Fire, if you plan to go into Wickford Harbor Fire, don't, because it's canceled for tomorrow. It's going to rain tomorrow, and so things happen. It's canceled. No worries. They've got 5 or 6 more events throughout the year, and they are wonderful events. The Armed Forces Salute by the Lafayette Band is a pretty big deal. I'm sure most of you have seen that. The first one of the season is at St. Bernard's Church, and it's May 18th at 2 o'clock. Just show up. No registration is required. And then the 80th anniversary of VE Day, that's Victory in Europe, was coincidentally today, May 8th in 1945. So that's kind of cool. The Department of Interior and National Park System will have a ranger speaking about that event and what it meant to the country and to those who fought. And but it will not be an event here. It will be online. And like most things, including this event, go to northkingstownri.org and sign up. It just takes 2 minutes, so it's real easy. So I'd encourage you to do that. That event is on May 21st. And then lastly, there's so much more going on this year and next year, which is our 250th anniversary of our independence for the country. As you know, last year we did the 350th anniversary for North Kingstown. So we're rolling right into it, rolling in hot. And a lot of the things that we did last year, we'll do again in 2026. And Matt's on the committee, and myself's on the committee, and Kate, and Mike Donahue back there. I won't leave you out, Mike. And we're going to do many of the same events that we did for the 350th. All right, Memorial Day, and then we'll get into this event. Memorial Day is May 26th, Monday, May 26th at 10 o'clock, as the parade kicks off, as it always does at 10 o'clock. But also we have a wreath-laying ceremony. And I think most of you know about it, but if not, that's a pretty significant thing. It's not just a wreath laying. It is singing of the national anthem. The VFW 152 is there. We'll have a gun salute, a presentation of the flags. And then as we started doing a few years ago, we'll talk about, to sort of humanize the sacrifices of our soldiers and sailors, we'll talk about one particular soldier or sailor who gave his life. And Lieutenant Stuart Cooper is that sailor, naval officer, pilot, who gave his life in 1943. He was shot down in the Pacific, and he was missing in action, now known as KIA, but at the time he was missing in action. He has connections in North Kingstown, and very, very fortunately, we have family. So we're going to make that connection this year again, so that you can understand, that heroes aren't from other communities. Heroes are from our community as well, and we have plenty of them. So that will be at 9 o'clock on the 26th, and 10 o'clock is when the parade kicks off. By the way, there's plenty of time to go from that event to the next event. And then lastly, there is a Civil War commemoration event in Elm Grove Cemetery, and that's at 11 o'clock for those who can make it down there. And that's it for those next few events. As you know, next year is going to be our 250th for the anniversary of this country. We're fortunate to have a lot of history in this area of the country, and our state's contribution and our community's contribution, North Kingstown's contribution, is rather significant. And we're very fortunate to have the folks from Archives, Lauren Fogarty from the 250th Committee, Ashley from Archives, and these are prints, I understand, of original documents, 15 of them from that era of the Revolutionary War. So without further ado, we're blessed also to have 2 representatives from Smith's Castle, John Dower and Marilyn Harris, who will speak to the documents and talk about the state's contribution, more specifically North Kingstown's contribution to the Revolutionary War. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Randy. Let's jump right into things here. Before we get too far, we need to thank Lauren and Ashley from the Department of State for bringing the documents down here to us. Clearly want to thank the town of North Kingstown for providing us this great venue that we get to use for these lectures. And last but not least, HistWick for putting on these great presentations. And I like to say when I get to these functions and I look out and see we have a nice crowd here, that North Kingstown history is alive. And we got to keep it alive. So let's talk a little bit about tonight's presentation. History is based on facts and evidence. What we have here tonight are the things that historians dream of. They're the primary source documents that we love the information in them. We're going to be talking about various families and people tonight, and I'd be very surprised if some of you out there are not descendants of some of the families we're talking about. We're not going to single anyone out, and we're not excluding anyone. So much information in these documents that Marilyn and I would be here for a week and a half if we tried to cover even a small percentage of it. I don't think we're going to get into any potentially offensive words. Some may pop up on the screen, but realize these are in historical context, so our intent is not for anyone to be offended by it. And as I just said, we're skimming the surface here. What I'm trying to do tonight is whet your appetite so you will go to the website where you can dive into these documents. There are hundreds and hundreds of pages associated with these documents on the website. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you how to access those documents. There's a lot of other stories related to North Kingstown, so I apologize ahead of time if I don't cover everyone's story that they may know of out there, but we're going to try to hit some of the key stories. Most of all, enjoy this incredible history that we have here. And I'd ask you to save your questions for the end. Let's clear up something right off the bat here. Over on the right side, we have some people up in Boston that want to say that things started in 1773 with dumping a few crates of tea into the Boston harbor. I'm thinking that King George was probably a little more upset over burning the British revenue ship, the Gaspee, than over the loss of a few crates of tea. But we'll just leave that there for now. So jumping right into the documents here, and you'll find some version of it up there. The Revolutionary War Privateers List. Those of you not familiar with privateers, they were government-sanctioned pirates. They got basically a license from the officials in Rhode Island to operate ships. They were generally owned by private individuals, as you'll see here. Right there we have the Marlborough, owned by John Brown of Providence, but the commander of that ship is George Waite Babcock, a North Kingstown resident. And you can see over on the left there, 1777 is when he got his privateer's license. 20 cannons on that ship, 125 men, and he was pretty successful. He captured 28 British ships during the time he was a privateer. Just to give you an idea, privateers averaged about 2 to 3 ships that they captured. So George did a pretty good job. This is his, what I would call his driver's license to be a privateer. You see at the bottom there where both George and John Brown signed it, and that's Congress gave them the certification for them to operate as privateers. There's a picture of George. Nice hairdo. I had one like that, I think, in high school. And I believe on the left here that is the Marlboro. I found this picture online, and there was nothing that told me where it came from other than it's the privateer, the Marlboro. And seeing as he was one of the most successful privateers out there, I'm guessing that was his ship. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn, who's going to tell you about some other things.
All right. So one of the documents that you'll see up here is what's called the Suspected Persons List. It's actually a collection of documents, and some of it is included, and you'll see it is actual lists, but it also includes things like inquiries that were made into these people. Now, who were they targeting, or who were they looking at? Mainly what we would call loyalists, or we would probably call them Tories. And there were certain characteristics that they had. They usually had economic ties, special concerns with the British. Very often they were merchants. And we'll get into some of that. There's some of those that ran into a little bit of difficulty with the revolutionary people. Political ideas and belief, they were pretty much loyal to the king. Very often it goes both ways, though. Sometimes they had personal interest in it, sometimes they had personal connections. So all of these things go together. I'm trying to get my thing, there we go. Okay, they were particularly interested with people that lived near the coast for rather obvious reasons. You stop to think what the British did even before we actually got into what we called the Revolutionary War, just in the Revolutionary period. Boston was already had been invaded or been taken over by the British. They were looking for ports along the coast because it made it easy for them to bring the military in. It made it easier for them to provision them. It made them easier to bring in recruitment. It made sense. So you're looking at Boston. You're looking at Newport. Okay, so all of these cities, and actually when it got down to the south, they were looking into Savannah and places like that. So there was a method to the madness, certainly. All right, so this is one of the lists. And it's hard to see the names, but if you could see them, I think you'd see a lot of them that are pretty familiar to you. The Northrops, the Wantons are on there, including Governor Wanton was considered to be, at least have loyalist leanings, and in fact, that's why he lost his position. So a lot of names that are on that list. Very often they were wealthy people because they had connections. Now you notice there's X's on a lot of them too. They didn't actually take action against all of these people, but they did have little discussions, I'm sure. And very often it was just a matter of signing the oath of allegiance, and that was all there was to it. Everything was just let go. They did actually prosecute about 17 different people, and one of them was a name that you'd be familiar with, which is Mr. Room. He actually came to their attention, I'm sure, for several reasons. One of them is he was a fairly recent immigrant. He'd only come to the colonies in 1671, so he'd been here a relatively short time. But in that amount of time, he had amassed a fortune. He owned over 600 acres at Boston Neck. So, okay, and they were doing with that coastal thing. We know he had definite ties with the British. Okay, so that brings him to their attention too. But what really did it is that in 1772 he wrote a letter, assuming that it probably wouldn't get out. And in the letter he criticized the governments of both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And he also suggested that it might be nice if we had a political group that was much more amenable to the crown. And unfortunately, this letter happened to get into the hands of a man that you probably have heard of, Benjamin Franklin. And then it got published all over the colonies. So he was definitely one of the first that was in their eye. They were looking at him. So what we have here in this document, actually, which I don't know if this is one that is actually reproduced here or not. But anyway, what we have in here is an order for Beriah Brown to bring him to the General Assembly, to bring him physically there so that they could kind of talk this matter over and discuss it. Well, apparently they weren't really happy with his answers because he ended up in prison for a period of time in Kingston and also in Providence. And eventually he was able to, he also had house arrest at various periods, and eventually he was able to escape through one of the British ships that was over in Newport, near Newport, I'm sorry, Narragansett. So he, in the bay is what I'm talking about, okay. So what we have here, again, is, now this is an order, and it's saying that Beriah should go out there, and what he needed to do was to take over possession of the farm and virtually everything that was in it. So, and he was to hold those things in his possession. He was to make out an inventory list of everything that he had taken, and then just kind of hold it until the General Assembly decided what to do with it. So those are the things that he did. And on the other side piece there, actually, it's one that John found, is a little inventory list. It's just a short little one, but it's interesting. I don't know if you can read it, so I'll give you a hand here. It says, one part of the inventory was 130 barrels of malt, 23 barrels of strong beer, 900 gallons of ship beer, whatever that is. I presume it's for use on the ships. 7 barrels of table beer, some hops, sundry, and you can kind of tell what was going on here at this plantation, can't you? So that's just a little bit of his inventory, but they would go through and very carefully inventory every item. So this, when we're talking about this suspects list, it included a lot of other documents as well as just lists of people. Actually, they ended up, I guess, actually prosecuting about 17 people out of all the people that they talked to. Most of them turned out they decided were not a risk. Some people were moved away from the coast, but some actually had more serious penalties to pay, as did he. So this one is an act to make general officers and assembly subscribe to the Test Act. Now, the first thing I have to do is tell you what the Test Act is, because I don't believe this is one that we have here. The Test Act was in 1776. It was in June 16th, and it was designed to identify and to manage these people that they had been finding on this suspect list, and what are they going to do with them now? How are they going to prosecute? Do they need to actually prosecute? So it was involving that, and it also had an oath of allegiance in it. So the first thing they did, actually the same day, is they said, okay, everybody in the General Assembly and any of the officials in the General Assembly, or the officers, were required to take this oath. And this is the oath that they took, which basically said that they thought that the cause was a just cause, and that they would not indirectly or directly afford assistance of any kind whatsoever to any fleets, armies, anything during the continuance of the war, and that they will assist in the defense. So they were required to do that. And at that point, it was just the officers in the General Assembly that were making that oath. Again, the names on here would be names from the assembly, so they would, some of those I'm sure would be familiar as well.
Marilyn,
Yeah,
go back to that one just
sure.
quick.
Yeah,
Right in the middle column, John Northup. and
Right, oh, that's right.
Sylvester Gardner.
Thank you.
Are the two representatives, the two deputies of the lower house that signed it.
right, yeah. So this would be both the upper and the lower house, which were called by different names than we tend to do today. This is what is often called the Declaration of Independence for Rhode Island, which I think Randy mentioned this too. May 4th is considered to be Declaration Day. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But this was the... Okay, this was a list of grievances. It started out very much like the Declaration of Independence with a list of grievances. And this was 2 months before our Declaration of Independence. Keep that in mind. So it was a little bit earlier. Now, what were the list of grievances they were giving is there had been a British Captain Wallace that had been in Narragansett Bay with the fleet, of course, but had basically shut down the bay for trade. And obviously that hurt Newport really badly economically. So that was one of the grievances. Beyond that, they also went into Newport and they requisitioned provisions. So they were taking the food, and they were taking the things that the citizens would normally be having. They also made other demands, and actually they burned down, I guess they burned down a few houses too, but they made other demands as well, but Newport didn't really agree to them, even though there was a fairly high percentage of loyalists in Newport, which was, again, another issue there. They were coming to a place where, well, eventually when we came in to try to free the people in Newport, there were a lot of people that didn't want to be freed. They actually were quite happy with being under the king. So when they made further demands on Newport, however, the town government actually refused them. And apparently, figuring out that, I guess the British were thinking, okay, we're going to win this war, right? There's no question about it. We're the strongest fighting group in the world at this time, so we're going to win this war. So we don't want to destroy Newport because we might need that later. So what they did is they went off to Prudence Island and the Bristol port, and they asked them for all these same things. We want your provisions. We want this. We want you to pledge allegiance to us. And the people there said, no, not happening. And they bombarded them, apparently rather heavily. So that was one of the grievances. So a lot of these grievances were related to things that had been done specifically to Rhode Island, not just to the colonies in general. But what they were renouncing was allegiance to the king. And that also included some new oaths. That, by the way, I'm sure everybody knows it, but that's the old State House in Providence. Okay, this gentleman is Jonathan Arnold. The Arnold name should be familiar to a lot of people. I see we have some East Greenwich people here, and there's one branch of the Arnold family that did a lot of things there. This is from his brother, actually. He was a doctor. He was in Providence, and he was asked to write the act. He was also a member of the General Assembly, obviously. So what the act actually said, and just a part of it was, wherever the name and authority of the said king is made use of, the same shall be omitted and the following will be substituted. The governor and company of the English colony of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. Now, because it renounces allegiance to the king, but still calls himself the English colony, and it was like that until after the Declaration of Independence. Some historians say, well, it's really not the Declaration of Independence Day for the people in Rhode Island, but we'll take it anyway, I guess. That's close enough. So, okay, where are we? All right, so now we're talking about some of the broadsides. I don't know if you know what a broadside is. Can everybody hear me okay if I step away for just a second? Okay, normally, the documents here, of course, have been reduced. A broadside is about this big. It's a large poster type of thing. And they were printed on heavy paper, and the purpose of them was to take them and to nail them to the front of buildings or to stick them on by some method so that everybody could get the information, so that they could see what was going on. They were not meant to be durable. They were not meant to last. There are very, very few of them that are in existence. And we actually have a couple of them at the archives here. So in this one, now to give a little bit of background, the Continental Congress, the Second Continental Congress, had, of course, adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th. And it became legal right at that point. That was our day of allegiance. It was not, however, signed until a lot later. So what happened that day is they approved the thing. They wanted to send it out to the states so that everybody would know what's going on. So what's the best means of doing that? Best means of communication in those days was these broadsides. So there was another gentleman, actually, by the name of Dunlap, who did the first broadside, and he worked through the entire night of July 4th to set the print of the entire Declaration into print. You actually had to do that all by hand, okay, and to print out 200 copies of the Declaration, and they went out to all of the colonies. Now, in the next few months, everybody was printing copies of that or printing their own. There are some errors in some of them because a lot of people are hand-setting this type, and things can happen that you don't intend. Now, the HistWick broadside was done, actually, it was the first one that was a written copy that we had of the Declaration in Rhode Island. It was done by a Solomon Southwick who lived in Newport. He was actually running the Newport Mercury, which is a newspaper there, which you probably know was James Franklin's paper, and then his wife took it over, and then he actually purchased it from some of the heirs. So he was running the paper. The masthead from the paper said, "Undaunted by tyrants, will live will die or be free." So kind of gives you an idea of what his point of view was there. So anyway, he printed these out for us. Another actually little thing, his wife happened to be one of the Narragansett planters' daughters. So he was kind of in the family in that sense too. So they got this out to the people, and everybody was able to see what the Constitution looked for. It did not have two things. It did not say by unanimous declaration, because it wasn't unanimous. New York, the delegates at New York, there had been some type of a screw-up that they didn't understand what their actual instructions were, so they did not vote. They abstained from voting. So it was not unanimous. It also did not have the names of the people, of the delegates who were going to sign it. It hadn't been signed yet. So that took a little while to get. So, but at that point, we at least knew what the gist of the text was. So on July 19th, these delegates from New York got the answer back, and they said, yes, we're in. Okay, so now we are a unanimous declaration. So at that point, the Continental Congress put out an order, and they said that we want copies to go to all of the different states, and also, and then actually exactly on the same day, Rhode Island signed it. And this is the act approved. This is a Rhode Island act approving the Declaration of Independence, and it was signed on July 19th. So exactly the same day as they said it was a go. We were in there and we were signing it. And it's a notation on the left that it's signed by the lower house and by the upper house. So we were right there at the very beginning. So at this point we have the unanimous thing. And as soon as they got the unanimous vote, what they did at the Continental Congress, they said, all right, now we need a copy made, a beautiful copy, and we want it engrossed, which word I've never heard of before, engrossed on vellum. Well, engrossed means to write things in very large, legible letters. So that's how it was going to be the official document. They had all the notes, they had it all written out in text, but they didn't actually have that document. Like when we think of the Declaration, the document, it wasn't even in existence at that point. It was being made. It wasn't ready until August 2nd, which is when most of the people signed it. A few people signed it ahead of time, and a few people signed it later. So then we go on. Okay, oops, okay. Yeah, surprise, I didn't know this one was in here. Okay, let's see what this said. Okay, so that's the text, all right, okay.
The only thing I would point out, Marilyn and I went back and forth on which one of us were going to do this, and I ended up sticking that in there.
Okay.
So I knew she was going to be surprised.
Ah.
But the important thing to note there, very middle, declaring the said states free and independent states.
Yeah.
Remember that part about independent states, because that's kind of a precursor of how things are going to shape out when it comes to the Constitution.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, and actually the last part too, with our lives and our fortunes, that's why they didn't print the names of all the delegates. They didn't have them on the thing first that went out. They didn't have them on all of these broadsides, because that's what they were putting on the line, their lives and their fortunes. It was considered treasonous what they were doing as far as England was concerned. And so John Hancock had his name there, not his signature, but he had his name printed, but, and the secretary had the name, but other than that, there were no names on it. Okay, then we come to Sarah Goddard, especially close to the hearts of people in Smith Castle, because she is the great-great-granddaughter of Richard Smith Sr. She actually, her adult life, she spent most of it in Connecticut, and then, well, she moved around a lot, but in any case, she was the daughter of Sarah Updike and Giles Goddard. Okay, she and her family were revolutionaries from the very beginning. I mean, they were, and her husband had died, and they moved to Providence and started the first newspaper in Providence. Her son's William Goddard, and they were constantly promoting things about opposition to the different acts, the Townshend Act, the Stamp Act, and eventually, they moved on to various other places, setting up newspapers in all different kinds of places. So they went to Philadelphia. They set up a newspaper in Philadelphia. They went to, after this one, they went to, let's see, where else did they go? They went down to Baltimore and set up another newspaper. Now, William was the one that kind of started the newspapers, but very often it was Sarah. And then after Sarah died, which was in 1770, it was Mary Catherine, who was the sister, that actually ran the operations. So what's special about, there's a couple of things special about the Goddard broadside. The very main one, as far as historians are concerned, is that it actually listed all of the delegates, the people that had signed, that were signing it. Why did they let it go then? Because just before that, in December, there'd been the vast battles of Trenton. And I think the Continental Congress got the idea, we might win this thing. There's actually a chance. And so what they did is they ordered her to print this broadside. She was the only printer in Baltimore at that time, but besides that, she was a female. The other thing is that at the bottom, it also, I believe, by then they had gotten, let's see, January. Yeah, by then they had gotten in the unanimous. And then also at the bottom, and you can see on the right-hand side, there's a thing that enlarges it a little bit, and it says, printed in Baltimore by Mary Catherine Goddard. Now, when she was the publisher of this paper, she would always write M.L. Goddard. Didn't want people to know that she was a female. She wanted everybody to know, and she was very proud of it. Unfortunately, I found out when I was looking at the reproduction here today, apparently the copy and there aren't very many copies, I think there's maybe 6 to 8 copies left of this broadside, which again was a very large document, but the one that was from Rhode Island, somebody went through and crossed out her name at the bottom, put a line right through it. So it's a little difficult to see on the copy there. On this one, you can definitely see it. She was very proud of that. It was kind of considered I'm sure it was one of the high points of her life. All right, so I've been going on too long. Okay, so the declaration, the real declaration, the one on vellum, that's engrossed on that vellum there. Vellum, by the way, is calfskin, just in case you're curious, is in very bad shape. And it was in very bad shape a long, long time ago. It was carried around by the Continental Congress from places to places. It was folded, it was unfolded, it was shown to people, it was put in places that, there was no temperature control or anything of the kind. Some of the signatures, if you've seen it, are practically illegible. But the copy that you see on the right is what we usually think of as at least I know I do. When you think of the Declaration of Independence, that's what I think of it looking like. And that is... what is that? Okay, that's the William Stone engraving, those copies that are made from it. So in 1820, John Quincy Adams, as a matter of fact, he was Secretary of State, and he realized that the Constitution was not really in very good shape, or the Declaration was not in good shape, and he asked William Stone to make an engraving of it on copperplate. And he didn't leave any records as far as his process, but as far as we can tell, it is the most accurate copy that you can imagine that was, given the technology at that time particularly. And it has all the signatures in signature form, not printed, they're actually in signature. So when we think of the Declaration, that's probably the one that we're thinking of. So, John, it's up to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Marilyn. This next document is actually multiple pages, something I'm very familiar with and I use quite often. It's a military census. And there's what the pages look like. The page on the left is the very first page of the military census for North Kingstown. The page on the right is the very last page. And Beriah Brown, that we've been talking about, those of you that don't know who Beriah Brown is, he was the high sheriff here in Kings County for decades. Probably one of the most powerful men in Rhode Island. He had the ability to do a lot of things that other people couldn't do. But anyway, that's him on the top, on the left page, and the columns across the top. And this is something else interesting. These are form pages printed out by this period in time. A lot of people aren't aware of that. They actually would print these out for a census and give them to people to fill them in. Beriah Brown across the top there. The sweet spot in the military census is that first column. That's the men from age 16 to 50 able to bear arms. And the reason they created this military census was that by 1777, the enthusiasm to enlist had begun to wane. And Rhode Island, very similar story to all other 12 now states, having difficulty filling the ranks. So they needed to know who it was they had available. If you look, Beriah is listed in over 60, but it doesn't say whether he's able to bear arms or not. And then the far right two columns are men of color. And you see listed there, Beriah supposedly had one man of African descent, but I know that he actually had 3 that enlisted, so it was not uncommon to not be truthful on the military census. Page on the right, totals for North Kingstown, that sweet spot up there, 336 men. Only 10 men were listed between 16 and 50 that were unable to bear arms. A lot of men wanted to be listed on the military census that, yes, I can serve, but it was a whole different story when it came to serving. Way over to the right, there at the top, we see 60 men of African descent, and just to the right of it, 1 man of indigenous descent. Then you see a lot of names written below there. On the left side, we have the state militia. We've got 27 men from the state militia, including Captain Samuel Phillips at the top. And then to the right, we have men that are serving in the Continental Line. I'm going to take just a couple seconds here and talk about the man at the very top, and that's Captain Thomas Cole. He was a true war hero right here, from right here in North Kingstown, served over 7 years. He began his military career at the Siege of Boston, and it ended the end of his military career as far as seeing action was at Yorktown. He had some problems at home and had been trying to resign and get out, and eventually Washington let him go, but they didn't want to let him go. He was, like I said, he saw a lot of action. He served under 3 pretty well-known officers above him, Nathaniel Greene, James Mitchell Varnum, and Colonel Christopher Greene. So he was a true Revolutionary War hero for us here in North Kingstown. So this next page, I stuck this in here. The guy at the very top, Marilyn and I are a little bit familiar with him, Lodowick Updike from Smith's Castle, and he's listed as being over 60 but able to bear arms. And that's kind of interesting because he was accused of being a loyalist at one point, so he must have come around. To the very right there, you'll see a number 4 under the men of African descent, and 2 of his men ended up enlisting. And that takes me to another document. Now, they have this one in state archives. It's not with us today, but you can find it. At the end, I'll tell you where to find this stuff. This was an act passed up in East Greenwich in February 14th of 1778. It was allowing slaves to enlist in the Continental Battalion. Remember I said earlier, enthusiasm to enlist had died off considerably by 1777. This was the answer that Rhode Island came up with, a very unique story, and I just threw some names up there of men. There were others that ended up serving, but these are some of the men from North Kingstown that served in that so-called Black Regiment. Here's another item that I'm quite familiar with. This is a very interesting book that has a lot of documents in it, and sometimes it's referred to as the regimental book for the 1st Rhode Island, but it actually has men from both the 1st and 2nd and the combined. Eventually, they just had one regiment for Rhode Island. They called it the Rhode Island Regiment. And here's a page in here, and this is why this book is so interesting. The information, and I'll read across the top. It's got the age, the height, the occupation, the town the soldier was born in, the town he resided in, color of his hair, his complexion, where he enlisted, when he enlisted, and the duration for his term of enlistment. So this has literally hundreds of men that you can find information about, and a lot of men from North Kingstown can be found throughout this book. One of the puzzling things is it is not in any order. It's not by alphabetical order. It's not by enlistment time. It's not by location. I think whatever page was open and had some lines where they could write on, that's how they did it. So if you go through that, you'll see it's all over the place. So you have to really search it to find information. There's more pages. And right there we see John Bowler from North Kingstown is listed. All the towns are in there. You've got Providence, Newport, Johnston. Interesting also, you see Killingsley. So we had people come in to Rhode Island from the other states to enlist in different units here. I say Rhode Island played a very outsized role in the American Revolution, and just the fact that we had so many officers, 2 generals, in fact, with Varnum and Nathaniel Greene. I throw this picture in there because, one, I like saying the guy's name who painted it. It's a watercolor from Yorktown, painted by a French lieutenant, and his name was Jean-Baptiste de Verger, and I just like saying it, so I throw it in there. But to the left is a Rhode Island Regiment soldier, and these were actually the uniforms as he painted them of some of the different units that were at Yorktown. Here's a couple more pages. We're almost to the end of this one. Again, you can see the various towns in there. We've got Jeremiah Whaley listed. If you go through these, there are many, many men from North Kingstown. So if you do genealogy and you're looking for ancestors, you can find some of that information right in here. And there's another page, but this is the one I'm trying to get to. So, June 1783, the Rhode Island Regiment is located in Saratoga, New York. That's where they're camped at. And all of the men of the Rhode Island Regiment, which at this point included men of color and white men in the unit, they are all given a furlough on June 14th, June 15th in 1783, and that furlough turned into their discharge. They were not called back to duty, so most of them marched back to Rhode Island. not all of them. I've done research on a lot of these men. Some of them stayed in New York, some ended up in Vermont, some in Connecticut, some in Massachusetts, but most of them came back to Rhode Island. I guess if you found a good place to hang your hat on the way back, that's where you ended up spending the rest of your life. Another book that has, and when I say books, they have a variety of different documents in them. Military returns, just another word for lists. Could be anything. Could be a list of casualties in a certain battle. Could be as you'll see, there's some surprising lists. Could just be a payroll list, and that's the first one we see right there. This is Colonel Christopher Green's regiment, the payroll list. And this will have a lot of men from North Kingstown on it. And Colonel Green started the regiment here in 1778. He'd been serving much longer than that, but started a new regiment here, and they patrolled pretty much from East Greenwich down to North Kingstown. Most of the time they didn't go any further south than Quonset or Quidnesset area, but he's in a lot of documents that we find. So that's a payroll list there. This is Colonel Tallman's state regiment, and it just lists the captains that are in his regiment and the number of various officers in it. Privates, lists even the number of drummers and fifers in there. So again, just an example of what you would find in that book. The document to the left that is also in that book is a transfer of pay money for Christopher Green's regiment, and it's signed down toward the right-hand side, not to the very bottom, but you see Horatio Gates. Some of you familiar with the Battle of Saratoga will recognize General Horatio Gates from there. So that's a transfer of money to to Colonel Green's regiment. And then on the right, what we have is rations due to the officers of Green's regiment. So that's a list, and you can see it varies. There's obviously some favoritism there on who got the best rations. Maritime papers, again, a booklet that has a large collection of various records, and these are all related to commerce on the sea. And you heard me mention John Northup's name earlier. John Northup had a ship called the Nancy. They called it the brig Nancy, and very informative records in there on the commerce that he was involved in. I'm going to cut right to the most important one. This is, again, found a picture of what they call the brig Nancy. I think this is actually his ship. Here's the index to that booklet. And if you look down at the bottom, you'll see John Northup, little left of center. That's the number of entries. The other thing to point out here is when we've got these booklets at the state archives, these are not all the documents that existed at that time. These are all the documents that we luckily still have today. They do not include every potential document that was ever created. It's just the ones that we're fortunate enough to have in the care of the state archives now. But the document on the left gives you an idea, and it says for sundries for the brig Nancy, and a lot of stuff on there. Barrels of salt, we've got barrels of sugar, we've got coffee, got molasses, all stuff that was put on the brig Nancy for their trip somewhere, not sure where they were going. Some other various documents related to that. Battle of Rhode Island map. If you are a military buff, especially interested in the Battle of Rhode Island, this is great. I certainly can't go into much depth with it here, but I would suggest you look it up online. Some very interesting stuff. The battle took place for the most part at Portsmouth, and I love old maps during the colonial period right up to the American Revolution. They weren't concerned about north, south, east, and west, because we've got north way over to the right, and if you rotate it 90 degrees, they'd have it right. That's a close-up of where the various units for the British and the Americans were near Turkey Hill. So I'd suggest going online and taking a look at that stuff. As you see right there, it says below it, General Sullivan's expedition. Every military action started out as an expedition and maybe turned into a battle, but they didn't all turn into battles. So that's what it was originally called, was General Sullivan's expedition. And now Marilyn's going to talk about a couple more things, and then we'll be close to being done. Yeah?
Okay, so throughout the war, actually, before we get to that, John mentioned about Ludwig Updike being accused of being a loyalist at one point. He actually, it was somebody else in the town, I gathered, that said, you know, I'm not too sure about him. We're just wondering. So when he went to the town council, which is apparently where you went to sign this oath of allegiance, they wouldn't allow him to sign it because they weren't sure. So he actually, when he came there, and they called it, he was supposed to come back, they set up a time that he was supposed to come and be heard up in Kingstown. And he and Daniel at that time was serving actually in the military. That was his son. He was quite young still, but he was serving in the military, mostly along the coast, going up and down along the coast to watch out for marauding British ships, which were coming along and stealing the cattle and stealing food from anybody that lived around the shore. So that was his job. So they went and they trekked off to Kingstown. They got there, and this person that had accused him, just for some reason or another, he didn't have the evidence quite with him. He'd left it at home. So they said, okay, we'll come back the next day. So they stayed overnight, I guess, with the Robinsons. And then the next day they came back again, and they said, oh, we've decided to adjourn the assembly for the period. So there they are. So it's not settled. So they have to wait for the next time it meets, which this time is in Providence. And apparently he had a little bit more pull in Providence because they got it all straightened out and he was allowed to sign it. If he had not been, however, there were all kinds of things. You couldn't vote. You couldn't sue anybody. You basically couldn't do anything in the courts unless you had signed that oath of allegiance. So. But apparently he got it straightened out by that time, or maybe that was part of the reason why he said he was able to bear arms at 60 years old. We don't know. But anyway, during that period of time, they had been collecting any claims for damages. The British supposedly were supposed to pay for people that were housed in places, some of their soldiers that were in Newport, and they didn't. Sometimes they were paid and sometimes they weren't. Most of the claims come from Newport. There are a few from other places, though, as well. So this is one. Oh, I don't know if I can read it. I had a. Did we put in the slide that had the translation? Anyway, it was somebody that was named Oliver and Caleb Arnold. It was a father and the son. I finally figured out. And Caleb is the father, and Oliver is the son. Possibly by this point in his life, he was living with his son. It's quite possible. But in any case, the British had come in. It just says the enemy. It's very creative spelling, as you probably can notice. And they carried away his house. I assume he means he carried away the wood. They tore it apart, and they carried the pieces away back to their camp, probably to use as firewood, I would imagine. And then they also they took other things as well. And so they were quite concerned about this. We don't know if he ever got paid for it, actually, but he did have a request. You'll see here that there's a whole bunch of them from Newport. Not too many at all from North Kingstown, 3 they mentioned. One of those might be Ludwig's, because we know that Ludwig actually received a 14-pound reimbursement for a a little scow that he had apparently that said was almost new, is the way it's described. And 14 pounds today would be about $3,000. So it was no small, it was no small thing, but he was reimbursed for that. And possibly, hopefully the Arnolds were the other ones that got, were paid. This comes up to the Constitution now. Rhode Island was the first one to sign the Declaration, or to agree to the Declaration, but they were the last one to sign the Constitution for a lot of reasons. There were people that were still concerned about centralizing this federal power. There were fiscal concerns. We actually had our own dollar at that time. We had our own currency that we were printing, which I had never realized. I don't know if anyone else had. And they didn't want to give that up. So they wanted to make sure that that was taken care of. A big one was the whole idea of religious freedom. There was nothing in the Declaration that talked about that issue, and they were very concerned about that. And also certain segments, particularly the Quakers, were concerned about the slavery issue, that there was no definite thing in the Declaration about stopping slavery, about the end of slavery. So these were all things that they were worried about. So after the signing and all of that was after the Constitution was ready to go out to the states for agreement, they asked them to have referendums or to have conventions or whatever that they chose to ratify it. Most of them ratified it very quickly. We held out, and it took a long time, and then finally we had almost a dozen different conventions to discuss it. So this is the tally for March in 1788. We're still working on this project here, and it's the referendum. You'll notice that North Kingstown had 2 votes yes, and 106? 160 votes no. And not everybody voted. Some people just didn't vote at all. They just, said, no, we're not going to bother with this. East Greenwich had 2 yeses and 91 nays. There were very few that had, Little Compton was one of them that actually approved it. There were 2 out of the entire state that approved it, and the rest of them were rather definitely no. So what made the difference? What broke the log jam was basically the merchants, because it came to the point that the General Assembly got a little annoyed with these people down in Rhode Island, and they said, okay, we're going to have to work this out. And what they did is they said, all right, we're going to treat Rhode Island as if it's a foreign nation. We will put tariffs on them if necessarily. We will not allow them to trade with us. And the merchants, particularly in Newport, said, this does not sound like this is what we want. And so they managed to encourage people to sign, and it was eventually signed. And we are back to the end. All right.
Okay, thanks, Marilyn.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the referendum on the Constitution, I mentioned earlier how they gave us a little hint back when they approved the Declaration, and the wording in there was independent states. So they gave us a little hint that this was going to come up, and Marilyn pointed out on one of the previous slides, Rhode Island was not in favor of a strong federal government. Okay, so I promised you early on I would tell you about how to access these, and some of them literally have dozens and dozens of pages that accompany the document. This is what the website looks like, and it will have 15 different categories, and then you drill down into it, and it'll have various other documents that are all associated with it. Some of those books have multiple documents in them. And I think this works with the screens here. Anybody got their phone? See if it works? Does it work? Okay, I was pretty sure it would. I didn't know with the multiple screens if that was going to cause an issue, but it looks good. Good. So if you go there, like I said, this was just to get your attention, whet your appetite. No way we could cover all the information in these documents, but we gave you a little taste of it. Now for the shameless plug, Marilyn and I, as you know, are from Smith's Castle, And we have membership applications and other stuff out there on the tables. Maybe some of you saw it when you came in. And we need help there. We really do. We have a lot more ideas than we have people. Fortunately, we got 8 new docents this year, which is the largest number of docents that we got to volunteer, but we still don't have enough. Some of you may have heard a new program that we started this year. We got a grant from the Kimball Foundation, and we allow schools to come in and get tours without any cost to them. And then we also turn around and write a check to cover their bus transportation. Most cases, it covers all of it. So we're pretty excited about that, but we don't have enough people. We've got our regular tours on weekends. During the summer, we still have school tours. We have summer camps and private schools that bring students in. So if you're looking for something to do, we'd love to have you. We can use people that have skills in publicity and a variety of other things. So if you have any interest, please take something on the way out, or just become members. Just a little bit extra money from everybody makes everything go a little smoother. And that's where you find us, at smithscastle.org, for more information. And if anybody has any questions, Marilyn is going to take all the questions. Or we'll both take the questions. Any questions? I know it's, yes, sir. Well, there was on both sides, I think it was somewhere between 14 and 15,000. So it was significant. The battle itself was really one day. It started as a siege where they thought they were waiting for the French to show up, and then they had a little hurricane that drove the French fleet out, and Sullivan had all his men down by Newport putting this siege in place. And they thought that would work. Then they got word that the British were bringing reinforcements. So they said, well, maybe we better head north and get off and forget this whole thing. So that's what they did. During the retreat, the British decided to take the offensive, caught them in Newport, and basically it was one day. I think it was August 29th, if I remember correctly. So that's how that played out. But the maps that they have on it are incredible. Shows you all of the movement. And the Black Regiment that I talked about earlier, they played a significant role in that. They got caught by themselves with 800 Hessians, caught 130, 140 men in Portsmouth, and that's when it really started. Then they started reinforcing. Could have been a much, much bigger thing. Based on casualties, it doesn't rank very high significantly, and it really didn't prove anything. The British ended up leaving Newport. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You mentioned a lot of times when you were able to bear arms. What was the criteria for being able to?
That's a good, yeah. You self-identified that you were able to bear arms, and sometimes, as I pointed out, it was just men that wanted to give the appearance that they were willing to serve, but they weren't always willing to serve. I found men in their 50s that enlisted, and I talked about the act to enlist enslaved men. There was a man that was a frail old man in his 50s, and they took him and they discharged him within a few months of him entering service. So they would take anybody to bring the numbers up. Yeah.
Outlaw slavery in the 1780s.
Yes. Yep, 1784, yep. Yeah, Rhode Island outlawed, gradual manumission. So what that meant was, if you were already enslaved, you were enslaved for life. If you were born after 1784 or after, then you had to serve your mother's master for, I think it was 18 for women and 21 for men, and then they changed it, but it was something like that. So they called it gradual manumission. Yep, yep. Is Mark still here? Or did he leave? All right, he does, Mark Burnham that was here, does a lot on this, and he said the reason they made it gradual is that for the economy, if they couldn't just pull the rug on enslavement because so much of Rhode Island's economy relied on it. So that's why they made it gradual. But other states did the same thing.
There was that law in really early, like 1652, that actually was supposed to restrict the amount of time that they could be held in servitude. It was never enforced, as far as we
Yep.
know.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. That is a really good question. And to this day, a lot of indigenous men served. They fell under the act, but there were very few indigenous people that were enslaved at that point in time. But a lot of them served, and there's a question whether they really had any allegiance to this new country, or whether it might have been economic reasons. All of these groups, especially the marginalized people leading up to the American Revolution, it was very tough economically for them and became a lot more tough after the Revolution for them. But a lot of them did serve. The vast majority of indigenous people in Rhode Island at that point lived in Charlestown. There was I want to say 500 or 600 indigenous people living in Charlestown then, and a lot of men did serve. And I will be very, very factual about this. They were also more likely to decide they didn't like military life and take off. So, and they knew their way around if they, yeah, yep. Anyone else? Yes, yep, that's for sure. Okay, if that's it, then we'll turn you loose. Thank you.
As you all know, pulling off things like this have a lot of moving parts. We're very thankful for all the folks who sort of helped us pull this together. The Rhode Island State Archives, Ashley, we're back there. Thank you so much for bringing this exhibit from the State House up here. Jason Rooms, who looks like he left. Oh, there. How could I miss? Lauren Fogarty of Secretary of State, right next to Ashley. If you didn't know, as I mentioned earlier, this is next year is going to be our 250th anniversary for the country, and that's a huge effort. And Lauren is heading up that effort through the Secretary of State, and you're going to see quite a bit of things as it percolates down onto our level. And then, of course, last but not least is John Dower and Marion Harris from Smith's Castle for doing this today. These speaker series events are wonderful. We did this for the 350th for North Kingstown. Everybody loved them, so we'll keep doing it, and we'll probably do it next year as well. Speaking of next event, June 11th is the next event. Michelle's going to speak to this in a little bit. It's June 11th, I think it's 6 o'clock, right? And it's fairly, well, it's a bit unique in that we're going to film it, and it'll be a Revolutionary War walk in North Kingstown, run by Tim Cranston, our historian, and it's funded half and half. Our organization, Historic Wickford, will pay for half of it, and Battle of Rhode Island will pay the other half. But it's wonderful. Because it's a walk, I need you to simply send me an email at our HistWick email, and it is, I forget it. Historic Wickford, if you Google Historic Wickford, you pull it up. Just send me an email.
But it's gmail.com.
It's gmail.com. Just send me an email, and the only reason I need that is so we don't overwhelm Tim in the streets of Main Street. So, at any rate, the details of which, this is going to be another one of these wonderful events. So, Michelle, would you like to speak to this?
I think you covered most of it.